one of the things I'd like to ask you about is how you actually enjoy those little moments, or you were saying you have these dopamine hits when you start to incrementally get better at things, and I think that that's really important, to enjoy the process. And I know you have a beautiful practice of how you actually kind of log or track these things to keep it front of mind, because sometimes we have to force ourselves to look for these things. Sometimes we're just so laser focused on the goal or the big thing, we forget about the little things. So I'd love for you to share the process you do to actually keep yourself accountable, or like appreciate what you're achieving.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that all of us really experience, because especially when you're a high achiever, right? You always chasing the next thing. And it's really hard to stop and just realize that you are living something that you wanted a while ago. And that's something that for a very long time I wasn't doing, and I wasn't celebrating or appreciating, to the point where then it was always kind of like unhappiness and not satisfied with whatever was going on. And then a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, she gave me this is what she does, and this is something that she learned when she was at Amazon, and this is something they are encouraged to do, is to have a book of wins. And the idea of it is that you have a book where you will record all of the really big wins that you have professionally. And it can be, I for example, she launched, Siri or something, like, not Siri, sorry, Alexa. Got my AI confused. And so these big things, like big projects, big accomplishment. But then she told me what you need to do is to have a book where every week you write 3 things that you have achieved. And they don't need to be big. They need to be 3 things that you are proud that you have achieved this week. And initially, it would take me like an hour to think of one thing that I've done this week. But now, whenever you are going through the week, I start thinking, oh, this is going to make it to the book of win, Nice. And it's that mindset of, okay, now I see it while it's happening, that this is something good. And you appreciate it in the moments. And I think that's what's important about having the book of wins, because to be honest with you, I don't really sit down and read it. But it's changed how I view things on a weekly basis. And then having a separate book of the big wins. And this one is really important when it comes to you having very intense moments of imposter syndrome. And there are many times, and I'm sure you will relate to this, a lot of people will, where you are going through a phase of your life and you don't believe in yourself. And that belief dips a little bit. And in those moments, that's when probably the book of wins will help you if you sit down and look at it objectively. And I remember looking at like a few pages and thinking, let me see, if I didn't know who this was, how do I think? Because I've been in recruitment as well. I was like, let me see, how would I feel about like hiring someone like this, right? And then you're like, okay, this does look good to someone else, right? I was like, this is not a bad thing. But for me, to be honest with you, what has really helped in these things is my support system. I remember one day I messaged a friend of mine, and I told her, I am so tired today. I had to prepare these 2 things for tomorrow. I have this event tomorrow. I haven't slept in 4 nights. And I was like, this. And she was like, okay, but can we remember that you're tired because you're getting to do all of these things? And just that change of perspective, right? Of like, I have to do this as opposed to I get to do this. And immediately the feelings behind change. And then you're like, you know what? You're right. I get to do this. This is fun. I've always wanted to do this. And it's just the hard work behind it. But for example, being on stage, I absolutely enjoy it. Talking to people on the podcast, really enjoy it. So I'm getting to do things that I enjoy, and it's just the hard work behind. So that's why it's super important to be surrounded by the right people, because in the moment where you don't believe in yourself, they will remind you why they believe in you. And even if you don't believe what they're saying, but I just hold on to it like a little torch until I make it on the other side of the tunnel. And I think that's what's helped me throughout the years. And that's why, I always say, the 5 people closest to you, you are the average of them. So that's why choose really very, very, very attentively and intentionally who are the people who have access to you, because they will kind of like make or break your mindset.
Yeah, and they definitely shape you. I love so much of what you shared. And I think even just having the Book of Wins as a practice, right, as something that you do, activates that reticular activation system so that you begin to look for those things. So even if you just say you're going to do it, it's like, you know, the analogy of if someone told you to look for a red car, then you start noticing the red car. If you know that you have to identify wins at the end of the week, you start looking for them, and it brings it to the front of your mind, which is actually a really nice thing. And I bet you probably have more than 3 things by the time you get to the end of your week, you know.
Yeah. It's chaos in my head, you know? And for a very long time, I did not know how to deal with this, because I'm like, you know, I'm just thinking it through. I know what I'm doing. But then I started journaling, and that really changed the game for me.